Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Monday, President's Day, February 19th, 2018. It is 2 minutes after the hour of 7 Eastern Time. I decided to just start a couple of minutes early. We had a nice, lively little conversation beforehand on the board, which I always welcome. As long as everybody plays nice in the sandbox, I'm fine with it, okay? And this is a good thing. It's always good. Get both, this is how stuff gets done. People, put their information and and what they think is happening on the table, and we figure it out. I'm usually not one to get involved in the climate change conversation. I don't like to do it here openly on the YouTube streams, because that's not what my channel is about. It's about weather and weather forecasting. Those of you who are here every day understand that. So let's move forward because we have a lot going on, and we're going to start with the western part of the United States for a change, because things are happening there while we've got this big, strong upper air ridge building in the east. We are seeing some changes out in the west, and let me just fix something up here. Okay, so that's not good. So I got to get rid of something. Hang on one second. Let's remove that, and I'm going to bring up. We'll start with the weather models, and always smiling, pointing out the cold weather that's moving from the east to the west in Europe. From Siberia, and we're going to talk about that too, because that's part of the big upper high that's developing, the block that we've been talking about. Right now, that block is going to be east-based initially before it migrates westward, and part of the fact that it's so east-based is the reason we are seeing the very warm weather in the east. So let's first off, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of a little... I took the day off yesterday, so I guess I'm a little out of practice here. We're going to bring up the U.S. map tonight, and it's pretty snowy across parts of the central and northern Rockies, particularly up through Wyoming. There's a whole slew of winter storm warnings that are up throughout much of this region of the U.S., and it only stands to reason. It is warm. It's going to be very warm here in the east. We've got the deep trough that is out in the west, and that is going to be the signature over the next few days until the ridge in the east starts to weaken a little bit, and we'll see that when we go to the long range. Now, that warm-up pushing into the northeast, we had that snow on Saturday. I wound up with 3 inches where I live in central Long Island, and we had basically a 4 to 8 inch snowfall throughout much of the inland areas from eastern Pennsylvania across northern New Jersey, southeastern New York, even into northern areas of New York City, getting 4 or 5 inches, and throughout much of southern New England, and that extended up into include the Boston area. Thank you, by the way, those of you who put up your observations. They are always very helpful with regards to me getting an idea of how everything turned out. So it seemed like everything turned out according to plan, even though I was basically uncomfortably comfortable, as I put it, with regards to my forecast. So we are going to see record warm temperatures in many areas in the northern mid-Atlantic and southern areas of the Northeast over the next couple of days. A lot is going to depend on low clouds getting out of the way, which this time of year can be a very, very difficult thing to accomplish, especially right along the immediate coast. We'll probably have some dense fog issues over a large area, especially where there's snow cover. There'll be a lot of fog, and that'll eat the snow cover away very rapidly. So we will have that for Tuesday and Wednesday, but then there is a front that's going to be coming through. You see there's a large high up in Wisconsin, some more moisture that's shooting out from the Gulf states, and that is going to come in to my neck of the woods here on Thursday into Thursday night. And I would not be surprised, by the way, if on the northern fringe of this that there might be some freezing rain, sleet, or even some wet snow. That would not at all surprise me. I don't think it amounts to too much. What we're dealing with is basically some weak overrunning here, and maybe just very weak disturbance moving through in the upper atmosphere. I don't think it amounts to too much, but there will be a series of waves coming through the east from Thursday right through Sunday. You can see the second one for Saturday. Here's the third one. Now, what's interesting to me, and I'm going to, this kind of caught my eye a little bit. I mean, these should all be rain events. The only thing is that by the time we get to Sunday, this is at the point where the NAO is crashing, okay? And that's the reason why I'm just going to back it up a little bit. You've got this high. Let me just go back, okay? So here's the high that comes in for Thursday and Friday with a shot of cold air. Now that moves out because we're not quite at the point yet where that North Atlantic oscillation, that NAO, has crashed below the neutral line. But when we get into the Sunday time frame, that starts to happen. So there's going to be another high that's going to try to move across the top. This one not as strong, but if that NAO crashes a little faster, this high that you see on the here, it's up east of Labrador, okay, and sort of trying to ridge southwestward. That might be a little bit more important. So I'm going to watch it. I think it's a long shot if anything other than what's being depicted happens. But it's something I want to pay attention to because it looks like the low is going to try and redevelop just to our south. It might mean some decent snows perhaps for upstate northeastern New York and in through interior New England. And you can see what happens here by the time we get to Monday. That low starts to wrap up a little bit when it's southeast of Cape Cod. So actually the GFS wants to bring in some heavier wet snow into parts of coastal New England, Boston perhaps, on up and through coastal New Hampshire and Maine. Now whether it's cold enough further south of that remains to be seen. And then beyond that, when we look at the surface, we start to see the appearance of what is a blockier look. There's high pressure all across Canada that starts to build into the eastern part of the United States. The air is cold. It's not crazy cold, but it is colder than average. And when we get into the long range, and what I think is going to happen is, and at this point, by the way, let's not focus on what models are doing on individual runs with surface lows, because now we're at the very beginning days of March. It's the overall flavor of the pattern that I think is more important, that you're going to have this blocking scenario, and that is probably going to force any kind of lows that come out of the west to track further south, as this one is shown. Now, I don't know if it's going to be exactly like this. It probably won't be. This one, the model is, the blocking is so strong that the low drops way southeast, well east of the Carolina coast. Now, I don't know how realistic that is, but you can still see the edge of this low on the way the model handles it. This is out at day 12, day 13, and that is going to be that is what happens when you have blocks. If you've got blocking is too strong, you've got a problem. So let's take a look at where this is all going in the upper atmosphere, because that's where I think the game really should be watched as far as what the implications are in the longer term. This is kind of how I'm looking at this. I have said many times that you could have all of these indices in the world, these teleconnection indices, pointing in a direction that says that this will be favorable for snows in the east, and that could very well be. However, remember that you can have all of that, but if the troughs and ridges wind up lining up in the wrong place, the outcome is not going to be what you think it is. So I think it's more important that we just focus on what's happening in the upper atmosphere here going forward. And then as we get closer to the short range, we'll have a better handle on these individual systems. Now, here's the upper air at the moment. Big ridge off the southeast coast of the United States. So this is very warm air. The flow is coming up from Mexico, across Texas, Arkansas, on up through the Ohio Valley and straight up into southern Canada. This is very warm air. Deep trough in the west, which would account for the fact that we're getting, all these winter storm warnings that are up. I'll show you the warnings map when we get through with this. Now, there's your ridge. As we move into Thursday, you see how the ridge just starts to turn more east-west. It begins to flatten a bit, and it continues to flatten. In the meantime, from south of Greenland down to the Azores, you have a large upper air storm that is developing. And that is the beginnings of all of this in terms of the blocking. Now, as we move through the weekend, you start to see the edge of this upper high that develops between northwest Scandinavia and Greenland begins to push toward the west-southwest. And in fact, if you watch how the systems are moving even in the Atlantic, you've got the upper air features, the vortex, kind of retrograding back westward. This is all part of this blocking scenario. So now, if you look at how the jet stream is structured here, we're at day 11 and 12. You've got the strongest part, the coldest part of the jet off the west coast and off the east coast. Okay, so the vortex, normally you would see these vortexes north of the Canadian border in a regular west to east pattern. But because you have the blocking, that is now forcing the jet well south of normal. So it then becomes a question of, is there enough room for energy to come around into the east? And this is a big debate here. If you look at this at face value, okay, the trough is actually off the east coast and not just inland of the east coast. So this would suggest that you would get coastal storm development, but perhaps it would wind up being too far out to have any serious impact. In the west, the trough that's in the west, inland of the west, is now offshore, and you're trying to get these heights to come up a little bit. They're struggling. There's a lot of energy running around. This is a very, that's a very strong blocking signature. At the same time, it's kind of messy, because you've got all kinds of energy running around. So I think it's just going to make for forecast challenges. And in fact, at the end of the period, we've got a blocking high sitting over at Labrador with an upper low that's running southeast of James Bay, and you've got energy in this northwest flow that's coming out of Canada dropping southeastward, assuming it even looks this way, which we don't know that is the case. But you could see how the whole upper atmosphere changes. I'm going to put up the hemispheric view, because then we can kind of watch this sort of as if we're looking at it from the top down, okay? And I'll go back to the very start, and we can actually watch this east base block develop. It's just beginning. You can see there's this higher pressures aloft off the west coast of Europe all the way up past Scandinavia up into the Arctic regions. And over time, you start to get this upper high that forms, and you see it right there. You see how that big brown purplish area starts to show up there in between Scandinavia and Greenland. We would refer to this as an east-based block, okay? When the block is east-based, your troughs and ridges are still are in the wrong place. You got the block there, but you still have a trough basically in the west, and you still have a ridge basically in the east, although that ridge has gotten flatter. Oh, and that is something you would normally expect. We are, by the way, this is by Sunday, okay? And then as that blocking high begins to strengthen even further, you start to get it pushing into Greenland and then pushing into northeastern Canada. So now, at this point, the block is more west base. And as a result, you saw how the jet stream, you see how the jet stream over the United States changes here? Let me just back it up again. Look at it at this stage where the flow in the east is west-southwest and that trough is in the west. And then you see what happens as that block kind of just basically moves the chess pieces around. Now your jet is way to the south of where it normally is, and you've got higher than normal pressures aloft all through Canada on up to Greenland in the Arctic region. So this is going to have implications on storm development. Now, whether that means that there will be, another snow event, I happen to believe that as we watch all this evolve, I happen to believe that we are going to have a window of, let's call it a window of opportunity, during the first, I'm going to say the first 2 weeks of March. Maybe that window of opportunity opens in the last day or so of February, but basically, let's look at the first 2 weeks of March as a window of opportunity for something to happen. The blocks, the blocking patterns are probably, of all of the things that we look at, are the ones that are the most volatile. So, they often don't last more than a couple of weeks. It's rare to see the blocking signature last more than that. It does happen, but it is rare. And I don't think we've seen a blocking signal like this in quite a while. It's been a number of years, I think. I'd have to go back and look. We've had occasional appearances of the NAO, but in terms of the sustained appearance over a couple of weeks, it's been rather elusive, unless you go back during the winter months, unless you go back to 2010, 2011. That might be the last time that it really showed up. So when we look at snowfall here, it's not going to be very impressive across the east. You can see a lot of this comes out at the end of the forecast period with that low off the east coast, the one I said that we might want to keep an eye on, but for next weekend and into early next week. But here you can see there's some heavier snows are going to be concentrated back up through the northwestern part of the Great Lakes and back out through the plains. And if we go to the west, the west is finally getting their turn right now, although much of this is front end loaded, but the west is getting their turn with that deep trough in the west. So we're seeing substantial snows going on throughout the western part of the U.S. over the next 4 or 5 days. So I'm going to bring up the warnings that we have up, because they are considerable out in the west. That has been not the case for a while, but we've got this large area of winter storm warnings up for Wyoming. There were more up for parts of Colorado, but that since kind of gone to some advisories instead, winter weather advisories. We've got winter storm watches and warnings up throughout much of Utah. We have some scattered winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories in parts of Arizona and New Mexico, and then we have this large area of winter weather advisories up in the northern plains and on up through the western Great Lakes. Meanwhile, we also have flood watches up for northeast Texas and on up through most of Arkansas and southern Missouri, as the Gulf moisture is getting involved here. So if Franklin's on tonight, I think you might be happy with this. Maybe not the fact that you wind up getting flooding, but at least you'll be getting some rain. And we also have flood watches up for much of Michigan, in and around the Chicago area, northeastern Illinois, northern Indiana, and northwestern Ohio. Now, you remember they've got some snow, so they have snow cover and snow melt to deal with. So put on top of that a heavy rain, and you're going to have some issues there. And we also have flood watches up for upstate New York and some winter weather advisories up for Maine. In California, the blue area here, the purplish area, I guess, that is hard freeze. And there are also a few winter weather advisories that are posted in a couple of scattered areas in the mountains in Southern California, on up also into parts of northwestern Oregon, southwestern Washington State, with winter weather advisories. Yesterday, the whole western part of the U.S. was basically lit up like a Christmas tree, which was a bit unusual. So why don't we look at the teleconnections at this point? And then I'm going to come back to the GFS so we can look at what's happening in Europe. And I also want to take a look at what's going to happen in the Canadian Maritimes. But you've got this PNA, the Pacific North America Index, right now in a place where, and I've seen some forecasters who have followed this for a long, long time saying they've never seen it this strongly negative. I certainly can't recall it being this strongly negative. And this is really responsible, I believe, for the fact that in combination with the positive NAO that we have, those two combining to cause this warmth in the east, the negative EPO, which is actually not too bad on the negative level in terms of strength. It's down almost to minus 200, is not really having much impact. It's this extreme PNA index, and that I think that's really driving everything. And by the way, let me just say that when we saw this back in December, November, when we've got these things running at extremes, it makes models very, very volatile. Okay, they're going to change radically in the Atlantic. It's going to be how they handle that block, and you'll notice that the NAO crashes this weekend, going from slightly positive to strongly negative. So this is that time frame where that low off the New England coast is dropping southeastward, where the NAO crashes to off the wall. Minus 400 to me is an off the wall reading. Okay, minus 600 is basically off the planet. So the off the wall reading for the NAO is a signature that is going to be there once it gets below that minus 200 range. So that's going to be from February 25th right through March 6th. So we're going to have that NAO there. The PNA, by the way, starts from that deeply negative level, does start to spike up, takes this kind of steady climb. I wouldn't say spike is probably not the right word for it, but it does start to accelerate upward over time, so that it's approaching the neutral line as we round to about the March 5th, March 6th time frame. So that might be something to think about. The EPO, on the other hand, is negative, kind of goes a little positive for a couple of days over the weekend, then it drops negative again. It's not crazy negative, but it is negative. So, I think that's the signals here certainly suggest that the weather in the east is definitely going to change from what we have, and the extreme nature of this is going to make these short range models, these shorter range models, they're going to be very difficult to follow from run to run. They're going to have the signature of what the upper air is, but in terms of specifics, beware that you're going to see some strange things, and you're going to see model prints like yesterday's in the afternoon, which printed a huge storm just off the East Coast, on the GFS at least, on one particular run. Rather than do not focus on those individual prints. If you start seeing this stuff flying around on social media, do not focus on the individual prints, because they are not really valid at this point, okay, that far out. Let's take a look at what's happening in Europe. Okay, and we'll bring up the European map, and well, here's a quick look at the 10-day snowfall, which is we've seen heavier, but the bigger story I think is going to be the cold. So we'll put up I'm going to show you the anomalies here. You can see what happens over the next several days. Temperatures averaging below normal over a good chunk of Europe, particularly the northwestern part of Europe. And there's that really hold on, I got to stop this. I want to start this again. This is the result of that east base block building. You've got cold air from Siberia. Watch that bluish purple area and how it migrates westward. It just basically sweeps across Western Europe, and it's kind of backed off from yesterday, where it had it all the way down into Italy. I mean, it's some ridiculous anomalies there, but this is showing to be very cold across at least the northern half of Europe through the 10-day period, and even going out to day 12, 13 before it starts to moderate. It stays pretty cold in England, except in southern England, where it's a little above normal, but it's below normal in northern England and Scotland right through. So this is a pretty wintry scene. I just want to see what it does with respect to individual days weather-wise, and right now, I mean, it doesn't look all that impressive in terms of any kind of precipitation events. It looks like it's mostly dry. You get that cold air comes in. You can see the model picks up on the winds coming in from the east across the North Sea and spreading snows into England and Ireland here. And you see it there. And then you've got this low that it brings across toward France, and in the cold air to the north, there'll probably be some snow with that as the low moves inland and weakens. So it looks like a lot of activity there. Why don't we go to Canada now, because this is going to change the weather picture for the Canadian Maritimes if we're getting into this blocking pattern, that's going to make things very interesting, I believe, for you guys. So why don't we start from the beginning, so we know that that is not the case now. You are going to get some snow to rain as we move through this week. And here comes the next one for the weekend, which doesn't look like anything special, but there's that storm for Sunday. And you can see here, the model actually drops that southward out in the Atlantic as the block develops. Then you've got another storm here on this run that's well southeast of Newfoundland. Again, because of the blocking, that's where these storms are coming from. And you'll notice, by the way, how everything suddenly starts backing in from the east. Let me just back this up. So this is at day 8, next Wednesday. Watch how the precip starts backing in from the east. That is the blocking that's developing, the big Atlantic blocking, that the storminess that's going to be south of 40 degrees north. So you're going to actually have stuff coming in from the east rather than coming up from the southwest. So as you can see, it really is going to make for some interesting weather scenarios going forward. And you know what, by the way, it's not out of the question that we could wind up, you know, in a colder and drier scenario here in the eastern states with all of this going on. There is nothing here, nothing at this point that we can make any strong conclusions out of with regards to all of this. I think it's just going to be a lot of fun to watch. Okay, I really think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Again, I would say that for the Northeast, there will be a window of opportunity while this is all going on, and we're just going to have to wait and see, you know, how the short range, how it handles whatever energy's running around. Where are the troughs? Where are the ridges? You know, where are the short waves that are going to be in play here? So we'll see. That's all the best that anyone can say at this point. I know I've seen so much out there talking about you know, potential big storm for the first part of March. I would never say that. I would never say that. David Schwartz, I'll be at the Floral Park Library tomorrow on Long Island. It's right near, not too far from Belmont Racetrack, which is one of my favorite places. I don't know if I can live stream it. I'm by myself, so it's hard for me to do that and do my presentation at the same time. Always smiling at upper 30s there, Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius, and it was in the 50s earlier today. So yeah, your weather is crazy. Wait till that cold air sweeps in from the east. The blocking is there. It's going to happen. That's the broad statement. The specific statement remains to be seen. So we'll just have to wait. I'm just trying to check through your amounts. Timothy Veltman, 3 to 8 feet of water locked up in the Adirondack snow. I'm sorry, 3 to 8 inches of water locked up in that Adirondack snowpack, and there is quite a bit of snowpack in upstate New York and in interior New England. Brandon Grabelchoff, I hope I said that right. Grablachoff. I would like to see one more moderate to heavy snow event this winter. We had one big blizzard of 16 so early in January, so you're on the Jersey Shore near Toms River, and a few minor to moderate events. Your snowfall is averaging above normal for the whole winter. So yeah, I think there's room and there's still time. We saw what happened this weekend. There's a lot of areas just inland and central New Jersey that wound up with a few inches of snow, which was, you know, a lot of models didn't handle that. And by the way, the GFS was terrible. GFS had rain all the way up north of Route 84. Okay, so you know, you know, with these model indices stretched to extremes, I wonder if the global models are just having a rough time all the way around. The short range models did much better. The big winner, I think, was the NAM. The short range model, the HRRR, on this event actually did very, very well for the immediate coast. So we'll keep an eye on that when it's time to use those tools again. Snow fun tomorrow and Wednesday on Long Island. Outdoor cigar smoking weather. Well, you know what? Let's watch for the fog, though, and the low clouds. They might be tough to get out of the way, but if it's in the 50s, it works for me. Many say cough instead of choff. Okay, so but which way would you like me to say it? So it's, excuse me, grabla cough or grabla choff. You tell me how you want me to say it, because I know I'm touchy with Cioffi, so I can understand it. I want to get it right. Why did NOAA stop weather radio frequencies in the New York area? 162.55 not in service. Maybe they could be doing some routine maintenance, or because it's a holiday weekend, something went down and they don't have anybody on shift to fix it. I think maybe the second scenario is more likely than the first, because you know, they're not exactly hiring people these days in the federal government, in weather at least. Does average air pressure change with latitude? Yes, as the further north you go, there's pressures tend to be not only higher, but the swings in pressure tend to be wider. You get deeper lows, except with the exception of hurricanes in the tropics, but you get more intense lows and very strong highs. So you tend to see large pressure changes up in the, as you go further north in latitude, and that means that your higher pressures are higher and your lower pressures are lower. Let's see. I'll say, so I said grabla choff. Okay, thank you. Yes, Shellyman Studios wants to barbecue this week. Go right ahead. As far as I'm concerned, I used to barbecue even when it was in the 20s sometimes. I didn't do it this year, but in the past I have. Although it's tough to warm up your grill to get it hot enough when you're trying to blacken a steak on a barbecue. And no problem. Sebastian P., did I get to your question? I didn't even see it. Where is your question? I'll tell you what, put it, oh, change with latitude. Oh, okay, great. It seems like Dulles could set an all-time February high and low record on the same day, Wednesday, but why the low record on Wednesday? But that depends on sun and clouds. The high record, yeah, but, oh, the warmest low. Okay, I'm sorry. I was wondering where you were going with that, Joshua. Charles Baker, as a young boy, 47 to 53, it seemed we would sled and ice skate most of the winter. Not a lot of snow, but cold in PA. You know, that happens. And, you know, I was having this conversation, you know, with Tom Adams earlier. We were talking about this. There's a nostalgic thing that develops in folks' memories when they think back. And I'm not doubting what you say, but I just have to tell you, when I ask people about, you know, that live in my area, and I ask them, did it snow that are my age, which is, let's just say, and I mean, I'm 59, but let's talk about people that are at least in their 50s, and I ask them, you know, when you think back to the times in the 70s and 80s when you were younger, did it snow more then, or does it snow more now? They almost always, virtually all of them will say that it snowed more then than it snows now. And when I tell them that not only is it the opposite, but that the snowfalls here where I am are actually double in the last 17 or 18 winters than they were in the prior 30, they don't believe me, but it's true. The average snowfall is more than double that 30-year period. So, you know, I think there's this sense of like kind of waxing nostalgically about it. You have to really kind of go back and look at the numbers. But I'm not like I said, I'm not doubting what you say. I would have to really go back and look. Joey Logano's phone was dying, but he good night to you too. You know, charge it better next time. Let's see. I'm just trying to run through everybody's questions here. Kevin Francis, there'll be others. I have a number of other ones coming up in different places. I think the next one after that is in early April. I'll be in Babylon or in North Babylon. I'm not sure which, but I will post about it. But there'll be a number of them coming up over the next few months that if you can attend, that would be great. Let's see. let's see, Timothy Veltman. Aside from a few good winters since 2000, there have been more. There have been more than a few good winters, Timothy. There's been more snow than from 1983 to 2000. You could back that all the way to 1970. Okay, I've run through these stats numerous times. It's just amazing what occurred in those 30 years, which was an absolute lack of snowfall, and the abundance of snowfall in the last 17, 18 years. Patrick B., I think your window is going to be for the first 2 weeks of March. That is about as long as I would expect this blocking pattern to hold. Maybe it'll be a surprise and last a little bit longer. But there's where your window of opportunity is. If it doesn't happen then I think the only way it happens after that is that you're going to have absolutely perfect setups as far as having enough cold air, especially for coastal areas. For inland areas, it might be a bit different. But we've had a number of late March, early April events just inland of the coast over the last few years. So I wouldn't be surprised if we wind up seeing that again. But for the coast, it becomes a little more problematic as we go toward the end of the month and the beginning of April. Not impossible, but it does become problematic. Cullen, you got 8. That's great. So you're up to 22.5. I got 3. So I'm up to 35.2. Okay. So I'm still ahead of you, being in central Long Island. All right, folks. I got to call it quits here at this point. I think we had a good discussion here today. I really appreciate everybody being here. Thank you very much. And remember, you can check out latest website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com. If you're there, by the way, if you shop on Amazon on a regular basis, if you go through the Amazon links, you can get your Amazon stuff, and Amazon gets me gives me a couple of percent back, where I can get a cigar. So it doesn't cost you an extra dime. Amazon's coming out of Amazon's pocket, and I really appreciate it. And it's a great, easy way to say thank you. And Stephen Franco, good to see you, pal. Hope you had a good weekend. And we will. I'm trying to think if there's any other thing. So let me just remind everybody again, if you're on Long Island or if you're in Queens or in the New York City area or even in Westchester, if you want to make the drive, I'll be at the Floral Park Library in Floral Park. That's not too far from Belmont Racetrack, just into Nassau County on Long Island. It's pretty easy to get to off the Long Island Expressway or the Northern State Parkway. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, February 20th at 7 p.m., and we'll talk more about this upcoming weather pattern, where we've been and where we're going for the remainder of the winter. And maybe we could peek ahead as far as the summer is concerned and hurricane season. If I can do a little digging on that, we'll see. We'll see if I can come up with some, wonderful conclusions at this point. I'm not a big long range guy, as everybody knows. All right, have a great rest of your holiday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.